The crisp autumn air nipped at Ryan's cheeks as he walked briskly through the bustling streets of downtown Seattle. The 16-year-old sophomore had just finished basketball practice, his muscles aching pleasantly from the exertion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, Ryan pulled his jacket tighter around his body, his mind already drifting to thoughts of a warm dinner and the comfort of home. Before we continue, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching this video from. I'd love to know. The city thrummed with its usual evening energy. Commuters rushing to catch buses, street musicians serenading passers-by, and the enticing aroma of coffee wafting from countless cafes. Ryan had walked this route countless times, his feet carrying him almost on autopilot as he navigated the familiar streets. But tonight, something was different. Something caught his eye that he couldn't ignore. Huddled against a weathered brick wall, a girl about Ryan's age sat shivering under a threadbare blanket. Her eyes, a deep shade of brown, seemed to hold a universe of untold stories. In her hands, she clutched a cardboard sign that simply read, "Need help." The simplicity of the message struck Ryan like a physical blow. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. He was used to seeing people asking for help on the streets. It was an unfortunate reality of city life. Usually he would avert his gaze and keep walking, telling himself there was nothing he could do. But tonight, something stirred within him. Maybe it was the girl's age, so close to his own. Maybe it was the quiet dignity in her posture, despite her circumstances. Or perhaps it was simply that indefinable spark of human connection that sometimes occurs between strangers. Whatever the reason, Ryan found himself slowing to a stop. His heart raced as he approached the girl, unsure of what to say or do, but knowing he couldn't just walk by. As he drew closer, he noticed the goosebumps on her arms, visible beneath the thin fabric of her worn t-shirt. Without a second thought, Ryan shrugged off his hoodie. "Hey," he said softly, holding out the garment. "You look cold. Would you like this?" The girl's eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of suspicion quickly replaced by gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the city noise. She reached out tentatively, as if afraid the offer might be rescinded at any moment. As she slipped on the hoodie, Ryan crouched down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I'm Ryan," he offered, searching his backpack for something else he could give her. His fingers closed around a granola bar. Not much, but it was something. "Would you like this too?" The girl nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips as she accepted the snack. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice a little stronger now. For a moment, they sat in silence, the cacophony of the city fading into the background. Ryan's mind raced with questions, but he held back, not wanting to pry. Instead, he asked gently, "How long have you been out here?" Emily's gaze dropped to the sidewalk. "A couple of months," she admitted. "It's complicated." Ryan nodded, sensing the weight behind her words. He wanted to know more, to understand how someone his age ended up on the streets, but he could see the walls Emily had built around herself. Trust would take time. As the streetlights flickered to life around them, Ryan realized how late it was getting. His parents would be worried if he didn't get home soon. But the thought of leaving Emily here, alone in the growing darkness, made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar ache. "Listen," he said, standing up slowly. "I have to go home now, but would it be okay if I came back tomorrow to check on you?" Emily looked up at him, surprise and wariness battling in her expression. After a long moment, she nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "That would be nice." As Ryan walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. He had always considered himself a good person, but for the first time, he felt like he might have actually made a difference in someone's life. The realization both exhilarated and terrified him. That night, as he lay in bed, Ryan's thoughts kept returning to Emily. He wondered about her story, about the circumstances that had led her to that street corner. He thought about the stark contrast between her life and his own, the warm bed he was lying in, the full fridge downstairs, the loving family just a room away. For the first time, he truly began to understand the concept of privilege, and with that understanding came a sense of responsibility he had never felt before. As he drifted off to sleep, Ryan made a silent promise to himself and to Emily. He would return tomorrow, and the day after that if necessary. He didn't know how, but he was determined to help her. Little did he know that this chance encounter would be the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. Unraveling Truths. The following day dragged on endlessly for Ryan. His mind constantly wandered to thoughts of Emily, wondering if she was okay, if she had found something to eat, if she was warm enough. The mundane concerns of high school life, pop quizzes, lunchroom drama, sports practice, all seemed trivial in comparison to the harsh realities he had glimpsed the night before. As soon as the final bell rang, Ryan rushed out of school, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Would Emily still be there? Would she want to see him again? These questions swirled in his mind as he retraced his steps from the previous evening. Relief washed over him as he turned the corner and saw Emily in the same spot, wearing his hoodie. She looked up as he approached, a flicker of recognition, and then a small smile crossing her face. "You came back," she said, a note of surprise in her voice. Ryan nodded, sitting down beside her. "I promised I would," he replied simply. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the flow of people passing by. Ryan noticed how most pedestrians averted their eyes, pretending not to see Emily. He felt a pang of shame, remembering how he used to do the same. Eventually, Emily spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Why did you stop yesterday? Most people just walk by." Ryan considered the question carefully. "I'm not really sure," he admitted. "Something just felt different. I couldn't ignore it." Emily nodded, as if she understood. Then, to Ryan's surprise, she began to open up. She told him about leaving home, about the unbearable situation she had fled. She didn't go into details, but Ryan could sense the pain behind her words, the weight of experiences no teenager should have to bear. But it was what Emily revealed next that truly shook Ryan to his core. "You know," she said, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, "6 months ago, my life wasn't so different from yours." Ryan looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Emily took a deep breath. "My family. We were wealthy. Like really wealthy. Big house, private school, vacations in Europe, the whole deal." Ryan's mind reeled. He had assumed Emily came from a disadvantaged background, that poverty had been a constant in her life. The idea that someone could fall so far, so quickly, was almost impossible to comprehend. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily's eyes clouded with pain. "My dad, he made some bad investments. Really bad. We lost everything. The house, the cars, our savings, all gone in a matter of weeks." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "My parents couldn't handle it. They started fighting all the time, drinking. It got ugly. I couldn't stay there anymore, so I left." Ryan sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just heard. He thought about his own family, about the sense of security he had always taken for granted. For the first time, he realized how fragile that security really was. "Emily, I'm so sorry," he said, wishing he had better words to offer. She shrugged, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "It is what it is. But now you know, it can happen to anyone. One day you're on top of the world, the next." Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. Ryan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Everything he thought he knew about success, about stability, about the way the world worked, it all seemed suddenly uncertain. As they continued to talk, Ryan felt a connection forming between them. Despite their vastly different current circumstances, they shared a love for basketball, a dry sense of humor, and a passion for science fiction books. In another life, they might have been classmates, maybe even friends. The realization made Ryan's heart ache. He knew he needed to do something to help Emily, but the enormity of her situation overwhelmed him. How could he, a 16-year-old high school student, make any real difference? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street, Ryan reluctantly got to his feet. "I have to go," he said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "But I'll come back tomorrow, okay?" Emily nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'll be here," she said softly. As Ryan walked home, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Emily's story had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront realities he had never considered before. He realized that the line between comfort and despair was thinner than he had ever imagined. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Ryan made a decision. He couldn't solve all of Emily's problems, but he could do something. He would talk to his parents, ask for their help. It was a small step, but it was a start. Little did Ryan know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change Emily's life but transform his own in ways he could never have anticipated. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with setbacks and victories, heartaches and moments of profound joy. But in that moment, as Ryan drifted off to sleep with a newfound sense of purpose, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 3. A Ripple of Change. The following morning, Ryan woke with a sense of determination he had never felt before. The weight of Emily's story sat heavy on his shoulders, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt motivated. Today was the day he would take the first step towards making a difference. As he made his way downstairs for breakfast, Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. His parents, successful professionals always rushing from one meeting to another, were rarely home for family meals. But today, by some stroke of luck or fate, both were seated at the kitchen table, laptops open and coffee mugs in hand. "Mom, Dad," Ryan began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I need to talk to you about something important." His parents looked up, surprise etched on their faces. It wasn't often that their son approached them with such seriousness. "What is it, honey?" his mother asked, concern creeping into her voice. Ryan took a deep breath and launched into Emily's story. He told them about their chance encounter, about her current situation, and about the shocking revelation of her past. As he spoke, he watched his parents' expressions change from mild interest to shock, then to deep concern. When he finished, a heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Ryan's father was the first to speak. "Ryan," he said slowly, "while I admire your compassion, getting involved in something like this could be dangerous. We don't know anything about this girl or her situation." Ryan had anticipated this response. "I know it sounds risky," he admitted, "but I've talked to her, Dad. She's not dangerous. She's just lost and scared. We have to do something." His mother reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Sweetie, I understand you want to help, but this is a complex situation. It's not something we can solve overnight." Ryan nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and hope. They hadn't outright refused, which was a start. "I know we can't fix everything," he said, "but maybe we could start small. There's a shelter downtown that helps homeless youth. Maybe we could reach out to them, see if they have space for Emily." His parents exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations that only long-married couples seem capable of. Finally, his mother nodded. "Okay," she said, "I'll make some calls. But Ryan, you need to understand, we can offer help, but we can't force Emily to accept it. And we need to be careful about how we proceed." Relief washed over Ryan. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a start. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Really, thank you." As his parents left for work, Ryan felt a newfound respect for them. Despite their busy lives, they had listened, really listened, and were willing to help. It made him realize that maybe he had underestimated them all this time. That afternoon, Ryan could barely concentrate in his classes. His mind kept wandering to Emily, wondering how she would react to the news. Would she be willing to go to a shelter? Would she trust that this wasn't some kind of trick? As soon as school let out, Ryan raced downtown. He found Emily in her usual spot, looking tired but managing a small smile when she saw him approach. "Emily," he said, slightly out of breath from his hurried walk, "I think I might have some good news." He explained about the shelter, watching her face carefully for her reaction. To his surprise, Emily's expression remained neutral, almost wary. "A shelter?" she repeated, her voice tinged with skepticism. "I don't know, Ryan. I've heard stories about those places. They're not always safe." Ryan's heart sank. He hadn't considered that Emily might be reluctant to accept help. "This one's supposed to be different," he assured her. "It's specifically for young people. They have programs to help you get back on your feet, finish school, maybe even reconnect with your family if that's something you want." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the ground. When she finally looked up, Ryan saw a mix of fear and hope in her gaze. "What if it doesn't work out?" she asked softly. "What if I end up back here?" Ryan crouched down beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Then we'll figure something else out. But Emily, you can't stay on the streets. Winter's coming. It's not safe." Another long pause, and then, almost imperceptibly, Emily nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." The relief Ryan felt was almost overwhelming. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. As they made their way to the shelter, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He was doing something real, something that mattered. The shelter was a nondescript building, its exterior giving no hint of the life-changing work happening inside. As they entered, they were greeted by a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Ms. Thompson. "Emily," Ms. Thompson said warmly, "we're so glad you've decided to come. We'll do everything we can to help you." As Ms. Thompson led Emily away to get her settled, Ryan felt a strange mix of emotions. He was happy that Emily would have a safe place to sleep tonight, but he also felt a twinge of sadness. Would she still want to see him now that she was here? His worries were put to rest when Emily turned back just before disappearing down a hallway. "You'll come visit, right?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Ryan nodded emphatically. "Of course. I'll be here." As he left the shelter that evening, Ryan felt as if something fundamental had shifted in his world. He had always known, in an abstract way, that there were people who needed help, but now he had a face, a name, a story to attach to that need. And he had done something, however small, to make a difference. That night, as he recounted the day's events to his parents, Ryan saw a glimmer of pride in their eyes. It made him realize that maybe he wasn't the only one who had changed today. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger than he could have imagined. As he drifted off to sleep, Ryan's mind was filled with possibilities. He didn't know what the future held for Emily or for himself, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer content to be a passive observer in life. From now on, he would be an active participant, doing what he could to make the world a little bit better, one small act of kindness at a time. Little did Ryan know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge him, inspire him, and ultimately transform not just his life, but the lives of countless others in ways he could never have imagined. The days that followed Emily's move to the shelter were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Ryan found himself caught between two worlds, the familiar routine of high school life and the new, challenging reality of supporting Emily through her transition. Every day after school, Ryan would make his way to the shelter, his backpack laden with books, snacks, and whatever small comforts he could think to bring. Each visit revealed new layers to Emily's story and personality, peeling back the protective shell she had built around herself during her time on the streets. One particularly memorable afternoon, Ryan arrived to find Emily hunched over a battered notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you working on?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. Emily looked up, a mix of determination and frustration in her eyes. "Math," she said with a sigh. "I'm trying to catch up on everything I've missed. The shelter has this program to help us get our GEDs, but—" She trailed off, her gaze dropping back to the jumble of numbers and equations on the page. Ryan felt a surge of admiration for her perseverance. mixed with a twinge of guilt at how easily he had taken his own education for granted. "Want some help?" he offered, already reaching for a spare pencil. For the next hour, they worked through problem after problem, Ryan patiently explaining concepts Emily had missed during her time away from school. As they worked, Ryan couldn't help but notice the spark of intelligence in Emily's eyes, the quick way she grasped new ideas once they were explained. "You know," he said as they finished up, "you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about what you want to do after you get your GED?" Emily's pencil stilled, her expression growing distant. "I used to dream about going to college," she said softly, "studying literature, maybe becoming a writer. But now, it all seems so far away." Ryan felt his heart clench at the wistfulness in her voice. "It doesn't have to be," he said, surprising himself with the intensity of his words. "Emily, you're smart and determined. If anyone can make it happen, it's you." A small smile tugged at the corners of Emily's mouth, but her eyes remained shadowed with doubt. "Maybe," she said, but Ryan could hear the unspoken "but" hanging in the air. As he left the shelter that evening, Ryan's mind was racing. He couldn't shake the image of Emily's face when she talked about her dreams, the mixture of longing and resignation. It stirred something deep within him, a desire to do more, to somehow bridge the chasm between Emily's potential and her current circumstances. But how? Ryan was just a high school student himself, with limited resources and influence. The magnitude of the challenges Emily faced, homelessness, interrupted education, trauma from her past, seemed overwhelming. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, an idea began to take shape in Ryan's mind. It was ambitious, maybe even a little crazy, but the more he thought about it, the more right it felt. The next morning, Ryan approached his parents at breakfast, his heart pounding with nervous excitement. "Mom, Dad," he began, his voice steadier than he expected, "I want to start a club at school, a group to raise awareness about youth homelessness and to support the shelter where Emily's staying." His parents exchanged a look, surprise and something that might have been pride flitting across their faces. "That's a big undertaking, Ryan," his father said carefully. "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" Ryan nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "I know it won't be easy," he admitted. "But after everything I've learned from Emily, I can't just sit back and do nothing. There are so many kids out there who need help, who have so much potential if they're just given a chance." His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I think it's a wonderful idea, honey," she said softly. "What can we do to help?" The wave of relief and gratitude that washed over Ryan was almost overwhelming. With his parents' support, he felt like anything was possible. Over the next few weeks, Ryan threw himself into bringing his vision to life. He met with school administrators, drafted proposals, and reached out to classmates who might be interested in joining. To his surprise and delight, he found that many of his peers were eager to get involved once they understood the issue. Emily, too, played a crucial role in shaping the club's direction. With her permission, Ryan shared parts of her story, carefully anonymized, to help his classmates understand the realities of youth homelessness. Her insights and experiences became the foundation for many of the club's initiatives. As the club took shape, Ryan began to see changes not just in himself, but in those around him. Classmates who had never given a second thought to social issues were now passionately discussing ways to make a difference. Teachers offered their support and guidance, impressed by the students' initiative. But perhaps the most profound change was in Emily herself. As she became more involved in the club's activities, sharing her experiences, offering suggestions, even speaking at a school assembly, Ryan saw a transformation taking place. The timid, guarded girl he had met on the street corner was blossoming into a confident, articulate young woman with a powerful voice and a deep well of compassion for others in similar situations. One evening, as they sat together in the shelter's common room after a particularly successful club meeting, Emily turned to Ryan with tears shimmering in her eyes. "I never thought I'd say this," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "but I'm starting to believe that maybe there is a future for me after all. And it's all because you stopped that day, because you cared enough to help a stranger." Ryan felt his own eyes welling up. "You're the one doing all the hard work," he said. "I just opened a door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it." As they sat there, the weight of everything they had been through and everything that still lay ahead settling around them, Ryan realized that his life had been irrevocably changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far bigger than himself. A movement that had the potential to change not just Emily's life, but the lives of countless others. And yet, as he looked at Emily, her eyes shining with newfound hope and determination, Ryan knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly filled with challenges. But for the first time, he felt truly ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they had started something extraordinary. And together, they would see it through, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Chapter 5. Ripples of Change. As autumn gave way to winter, the impact of Ryan's initiative began to spread beyond the walls of his high school. What had started as a small club dedicated to raising awareness about youth homelessness had grown into a community-wide movement, touching lives in ways Ryan could never have anticipated. One crisp Saturday morning, Ryan found himself standing before a crowd gathered in the city park. The turnout for the club's first major event, a charity run to raise funds for the youth shelter, was far larger than he had dared to hope. Runners of all ages milled about, their breath visible in the cold air, many wearing T-shirts emblazoned with the club's logo, a simple design of two hands clasped together, symbolizing support and unity. As Ryan surveyed the scene, his gaze fell on Emily, who stood off to the side, deep in conversation with a group of volunteers. The change in her over the past few months was striking. Gone was the withdrawn, wary girl he had first met. In her place stood a young woman radiating confidence and purpose, her eyes bright with determination. Ryan's heart swelled with pride as he watched Emily expertly directing the volunteers, her natural leadership abilities shining through. She had become an integral part of the club's operations, her first-hand experience providing invaluable insights that shaped their initiatives. As the start time for the run approached, Ryan made his way to the small stage that had been set up near the starting line. His palms were sweaty, his heart racing as he faced the expectant crowd. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, but as he looked out at the sea of faces, friends, family, strangers all united for a common cause, he felt a sense of calm settle over him. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for coming out today to support our cause. Each one of you here represents hope. Hope for the young people in our community who are struggling with homelessness. Hope for a future where every child has a safe place to call home." As Ryan spoke, sharing statistics about youth homelessness and explaining the work of the shelter, he saw heads nodding, expressions growing serious. But it wasn't until he introduced Emily that the true impact of their work became apparent. Emily stepped up to the microphone, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice strong. "6 months ago, I was one of those statistics," she said, her words cutting through the morning air. "I was alone, scared, with nowhere to turn. But because of people like you, people who cared enough to stop, to help, to create change, I'm standing here today with hope for my future." A hush fell over the crowd as Emily shared her story, painting a vivid picture of life on the streets and the transformative power of compassion and support. By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. As the run began, with hundreds of people setting off along the course, Ryan felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Mr. Jenkins, his high school principal, standing behind him with an expression of amazement. "Ryan," Mr. Jenkins said, shaking his head in wonder, "when you first came to me with this idea, I thought it was admirable, but, well, I wasn't sure how much impact it would really have. I've never been happier to be proven wrong." Ryan felt a flush of pride at the principal's words. But before he could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the registration table. A news van had pulled up, and a reporter was making her way towards them, camera crew in tow. The next few hours passed in a blur of interviews, photo ops, and managing last-minute event details. By the time the last runner crossed the finish line and the final donations were tallied, Ryan was exhausted but exhilarated. They had raised more than double their initial goal, funds that would go directly to supporting programs at the youth shelter. As the crowd began to disperse and volunteers started the process of cleaning up, Ryan found a quiet moment with Emily. They sat on a park bench, watching the last streaks of sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Emily asked, her voice soft with wonder. Ryan shook his head, still somewhat in awe of everything that had transpired. "It's incredible," he agreed. "But you know, this is just the beginning." Emily nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "I've been thinking," she said, turning to face him fully. "All of this, the club, the fundraiser, the awareness we're raising, it's amazing, but I can't help feeling like there's more we could be doing." Ryan leaned in, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "Well," Emily began, her words coming faster as her excitement grew. "What if we could create a program to help kids like me transition back into school, or a mentorship initiative pairing homeless youth with successful adults in fields they're interested in? Or..." As Emily continued to share her ideas, each one more ambitious than the last, Ryan felt a familiar spark of inspiration igniting within him. This was why they had started this journey. Not just to raise money or awareness, but to create real, lasting change in people's lives. As the last light faded from the sky and the park lamps flickered to life around them, Ryan and Emily sat huddled on that bench, plotting and planning, dreaming of all the ways they could continue to make a difference. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But as Ryan looked at Emily, her face alight with passion and hope, he knew that together they could overcome anything. The simple act of stopping to help a stranger had set in motion a chain of events that was now touching hundreds, potentially thousands of lives. And as Ryan contemplated the future stretching out before them, he realized that this was only the beginning of their story. The ripples of change they had started would continue to spread, touching lives in ways they couldn't even imagine. And Ryan knew, with absolute certainty, that he would spend the rest of his life working to ensure that those ripples became waves, reshaping the world into a more compassionate, just, and hopeful place for all. Chapter 6. Bridges of Understanding. As winter melted into spring, the momentum behind Ryan and Emily's initiative showed no signs of slowing. What had begun as a high school club had evolved into a full-fledged nonprofit organization, with Ryan and Emily at its helm, supported by a growing network of volunteers, donors, and community partners. One sunny afternoon in April, Ryan found himself standing in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. Today marked a significant milestone in their journey. They had been invited to speak at a citywide conference on youth homelessness, sharing their experiences and the impact of their work with policymakers, social workers, and other stakeholders. As Ryan fussed with his appearance, his mind wandered back to the day he had first met Emily. He could scarcely believe how much had changed since then, not just in their circumstances, but in themselves. The shy, uncertain teenager he had been seemed like a distant memory now. A soft knock at his door pulled Ryan from his reverie. He turned to find his mother standing in the doorway, her eyes misty with pride. "Oh, honey," she said, crossing the room to straighten his tie. "I can't tell you how proud your father and I are of you. The way you've grown, the impact you're making. It's more than we could have ever dreamed for you." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, Mom," he managed, pulling her into a tight hug. "I couldn't have done any of this without your support." As they broke apart, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Ready for this?" With a deep breath, Ryan replied, "As ready as I'll ever be. See you there." The conference center was a hive of activity when Ryan arrived. He made his way through the crowded lobby, nodding at familiar faces and shaking hands with supporters of their organization. It still felt surreal sometimes, being recognized for their work. He found Emily in a quiet corner backstage, poring over her notes one last time. She looked up as he approached, a mix of nerves and excitement playing across her face. "Can you believe we're really doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself," he admitted. "But then I think about all the kids out there who still need help, and I know this is exactly where we're supposed to be." Emily nodded, her expression growing serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what to say today," she said. "About how to make them understand what it's really like out there, you know?" Ryan reached out, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Just speak from your heart," he said. "Your story is powerful, Emily. It has the power to change minds and open hearts." As they were called to the stage, Ryan felt a familiar flutter of nerves in his stomach. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, policymakers, social workers, community leaders all gathered to listen and learn, he felt a sense of purpose settle over him. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and clear. "My name is Ryan, and this is Emily. We're here today to share with you a story of how a chance encounter on a street corner grew into a movement that's changing lives across our city." As Ryan spoke about the beginnings of their organization, the challenges they'd faced, and the successes they'd achieved, he could see the audience leaning in, truly engaged. But it was when Emily stepped up to the microphone that the real impact of their message became clear. "2 years ago, I was homeless," Emily began, her voice strong despite the weight of her words. "I was scared, alone, and had lost all hope for my future. But then something happened that changed everything. Someone stopped to help." As Emily shared her story, the circumstances that led to her homelessness, her experiences on the street, and the long journey back to stability, Ryan could see the effect it was having on the audience. Expressions of shock, sympathy, and determination played across faces throughout the room. "What I want you to understand," Emily continued, her voice growing passionate, "is that homelessness isn't just about not having a place to sleep. It's about losing your sense of self, your dreams, your belief that you have a place in this world. And that's why the work we're doing is so important, because we're not just providing shelter, we're restoring hope." As Emily concluded her speech, the room erupted into applause. Ryan felt a surge of pride and admiration for his friend, marveling,